This past May, I saw the musical adaptation of The Great Gatsby on Broadway. This is a new production and opened on Broadway in April of this year, 2024. This is one of two different Gatsby shows, though it's the only one I've seen. So this will not be a comparison of the different shows, but a comparison of this show to the original book. The production discussed in this video is the one by Jason Howland, Nathan Tyson, and Kate Kerrigan. The prominent members of this cast are Jeremy Jordan and Evan Oblazada, so it's the more popular one. I think most people, when you say Great Gatsby musical, who are into Broadway and musicals and things, when you say Great Gatsby musical, that's the one they're going to be thinking of. So I'm going to be starting with my overall thoughts on the show. I want to say before I begin that my opinion of this show as an adaptation of the book is that it's not very good. I'm going to say that now. However, this is not at all my opinion of the performers and their performances in this show. These actors are working with the script and direction that they've been given, and these critiques I have are of the show itself, not the people in it. So like Jeremy Jordan was fantastic in the show, as was the entire ensemble. Everyone was great. I didn't see Evan Oblazada the day that I went, which I was slightly disappointed by, but the understudy was also fantastic. So this is not knocks on them. It is knocks on my opinions of the way the book was translated to the stage and the ways that I feel like it could have been done better. I'm going to go through the show using the cast recording, going song by song. I'm also going to be including the elements from the show that I remember from when I saw it. However, that was over a month ago now, but I wrote extensive notes in the days after the performance because the show made me so unbelievably mad. So mad that I couldn't even appreciate the parts of the show that were good for a while after, because there were good parts of this show. I'm going to get to those as I reach that point in the show, much like I'm going to get to my main points. I'm going to start with the first track, which is Roarin On. This one isn't bad. I mean, it's the very beginning. My issues with this song are more on a personal note with the writing style, and which is a writing style adapted from the book. There's not much adaptation from the book that's off in this one. I think like it's going to get into the beginning of my point. At the end of this song, we do see the first example of one of my issues with the show overall, but we'll get to that when we get to it. My main personal thing is that I'm not really a big fan of I had no idea what was coming my way, or my life would never be the same after this moment type of introduction / narration. But again, that's a personal thing, and we do get that in this show. Nick does say after the first time after being quote unquote introduced to the character of Gatsby, that if only I knew then, my life would never be the same, which it's a personal thing that irks me. From a writing standpoint, it's like obviously things are about to change. Like, this is a story. If it's an interesting one, new things should be happening to the characters. Like, that's how stories work. But like the real gripe with this song that I have is how repetitive the lyrics are. And that's going to be a comment that you'll be hearing from me a lot over the course of this video. Between the words party and on, I think that's over half of the words in this song. Like, I'm bored and I want something new from it. This is, the setting up of the 1920s, the roaring 20s. It's setting up that time period. There could be so much more than talking about parties in general, which really the only parties in the show and in the book are Gatsby's. So I feel like putting emphasis on the party is like, yes, the parties are obviously important, but how many are there really that aren't Gatsby's? Another comment I have about this song is that I feel like I'm constantly waiting for it to speed up. Like, it's the opening number, it's the fun upbeat, obviously inspired by the 20s jazz sound, but the tempo isn't as fast as I expect. Now, I admit I'm not an expert in the style at all, but I don't have to be to have the expectations. Like, on a personal note, my expectations for this style and kind of this establishing of the time period using the style is from Anastasia, honestly. Like, that 20s sound, like, it's very that Perry holds the key to your heart kind of sound that is so much faster than this song. So it's part of the reason I definitely felt like this song should be a bit faster. To draw another Anastasia comparison, and this is going to be it for that, it feels like listening to the movie version of Learn to Do It and then the version in the show, in the Broadway show from Anastasia, because it's significantly slowed down in the stage production. And my first few times listening to it after being a big fan of the movie in my childhood and then getting back into the movie because I got really into the show was, oh my god, this is so much slower. When is it gonna speed up? And I kind of spend the whole time like, okay, when is it happening? When's it happening? And then it kind of doesn't happen. Well, I mean, obviously it doesn't happen, and then I'm kind of distracted by it for the rest of the song, and I got that feeling from Roaring On, which was disappointing to me. However, to bring the comparison back to the Great Gatsby book, I think this song has too much in it. It's a good establishing song and gets New York City and the parties and the time period and all that. And we get some cool references like the city found another John Jacob Astor, which is historical New York note, and the title Roaring On, like the Roaring 20s. Like it's fun stuff, but just the very end, Nick's last stanza where he sees Gatsby by the water didn't have to be in this song. I think the moment Nick sees Gatsby should have been its own song a bit later in the show, because one of my big points that I have with this show that I'm going to get into a bit more when I get to the song that's the biggest example of it is the way slight changing of the order of scenes changes how the characters are depicted. And it's one of those things that stands out to me in a way that I can't really get over. And this is the beginning of it. This is also the beginning of another point that I'm going to get into later, in a few songs, really, which I think is part of the problem, is that it's only in a few songs. But the mystery of Gatsby could have been stretched so much more in this show. And instead, they shrank that and got Gatsby's mystery and Gatsby's explanation out of the way and replaced it with arcs that I didn't think needed to be there. And with that, I'm going to move on to Absolute Rose. The tempo of this one is more what I expected. It's not the same as Roarin' On. It's not the same type of song as Roarin' On, but it's more what I would expect from this kind of song. The one thing I will say is that the lyrics are incredibly repetitive, and also kind of a mess. This is also the first song that gets the example of lots of narration and exposition spoken during songs, which I'm not really a fan of. If it's a song, sing it, you know? Like there's a lot of the Jordan not singing in this one, which kind of fits the character because what she's saying is going very much against what Daisy is trying to do, which is set her and Nick up. However, the way it's singing versus spoken, while it stands out, it's not necessarily in a good way. It doesn't really flow right in on the cast recording. And I don't remember how it was on stage in the show. It might work better there. But there's a lot of shows will have pauses in the lyrics and actually speak, and that's not included in the cast recording. And I feel like this should be an example of that, but it also wouldn't make the song make sense, which I think is an issue in the songwriting, honestly. And it doesn't work, honestly. Okay, next to get into New Money. This is a really fun song. It definitely shifts the sound into a more modern music, but that's fine with me. I know I put a lot of emphasis on the expectations of the sound from the 20s on the first two songs, but that's only just because that's obviously what they were going for. When we get over to New Money, it's very different, but it's very fun. It's very modern. The thing that I really like about this song, though, is that it does remind you that it's an adaptation of a book, by using a lot of quotes from the book, which I think should have been done a lot more throughout the show, just because this book has so many iconic pieces of dialogue and iconic quotes within the narration that it definitely could have been worked in a bit more throughout the entire show instead of just this song and maybe another song or two like Beautiful Little Fool, which is at the end for some reason. Um, but that's another one that works in a lot of book quotes. However, to get back to New Money, we have the iconic "I see you looking at my cuff buttons, finest specimens of human molars" from Wolfshine, played by Eric Anderson, my Harold Ziedler. Um, but yes, it's a fun one. It shows just how crazy the crowd at these parties is. Um, it's a good introduction to Wolfsheim. So it's just so crazy and out of left field that it's obviously one that you have to work into the show. Um, this song also works in the Jordans. I like large parties. They're so intimate. At small parties, there isn't any privacy. A really iconic one from the book that I really appreciate getting in there. But I feel like if it's one of those ones that if you hadn't worked it in there, especially in a song like this, it would have been like it was right there, and it would be included in negative one of my more negative points. But this is definitely one of the high points in the show. It's one of the few songs that I don't really have anything negative to say about, whether from an adaptation or an actual musical standpoint, which you won't hear often through the rest of this show, through the rest of this video about this show. But yeah, fun song. I will admit that this one is pretty good. And now we move on to one of my biggest complaints in the show. Not the biggest, but one of the biggest, is that the mystery of Gatsby is not nearly done up enough. And this is so obvious in this next song for her. Halfway through Act 1, he's already been introduced and explained his entire history with Daisy. Like, this doesn't happen until halfway through the book, and Gatsby doesn't even tell the story. It's Jordan. Like, it's so frustrating. I remember sitting in the show, and I was so close because I won the lottery, and I was in, like, the fourth row, and I think I was looking, like, it, like, was one of the, like, common, like, I literally had one of the common, like, meme, like, what is going on faces, and I know that those actors could see it. I know that they could see it because I was so close. I think Jeremy Jordan spit on me at one point. And that happened all through Act 2, which I'm going to get in later, too, is the, like, looking up at these actors, like, what is going on? Like, I can't even comprehend it as someone who's read this book on multiple occasions and, wrote all the high school papers about it. Like, I couldn't, it was so shocking to me, some of the changes they made, and this is definitely one of them. Like, it would be one thing if this change was made, like, by rushing through the first scenes of the book in order to focus on something else later on, but that isn't what they did. Like, many of the first scenes translated from the book to the show are in a different order. Some of those changes don't really matter, such as, like, Myrtle's audience when she's talking about her husband's wedding suit, which I didn't think needed a whole song. But, like, some of it does. And that's another big complaint I have, is how out of order some of it is, just because it makes some of the characters, it changes how they're viewed entirely, which I'm going to get into later. Like, for that, I'm going to skip ahead a bit to, let's see, how many songs is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 songs. I'm going to be skipping ahead 4 songs until one of the key things that happened before Nick even went to Gatsby's first party in the book, before it happens in the show, is 4 songs after the explanation and the mystery of Gatsby is solved, which is so frustrating to me. But the only thing switching the order of Gatsby's explanation and asking Nick to help him reconnect with Daisy and Nick's outing with Tom and Myrtle is it makes it seem more like Nick is kind of a vindictive asshole, you know? Like the thing about Book Nick is that he was like actually friends with Gatsby. Like he likes him and he thinks he's a good, cool person, and he helps Gatsby when he hears what he wants. Sure, from Jordan, but he helps him because he wants to help him. In the show, Nick goes to this first party at Gatsby's and learns about, his love slash obsession with Daisy, which, however you want to interpret that. And he doesn't really agree to help him at first. And then he goes to the city with Tom and sees what an asshole Tom is and goes, you know what? Actually, yeah, I'm on Gatsby's side, as if that's like the deciding factor in whether or not to help Gatsby instead of like to help his friend that he's already like gone to dinner and hung out with a lot and been to many of his parties and been one of the only people at his parties that he actually talks to. Like Nick and Gatsby are friends in the book to the point of like, some homoerotic subtext, but like I'm not going to get into that. But they're friends in the book, and Nick likes Gatsby, and changing the order like this really sticks out to me just because it makes Nick seem much more like a vindictive, involved asshole than in the book when he's kind of just like there for everything and everything happens around him and he's not really too involved other than, agreeing to set up a time and not discussing it with Tom that Daisy's having an affair or that Tom's having an affair with Myrtle. Like that it's a lot of just passive things happening to Nick in the book. But in the show it makes him seem a lot more involved in a way that isn't really too good for his character, honestly. That really stands out and frustrates me as as a staged adaptation. However, about the song itself, Jeremy Jordan's vocals are obviously incredible, out of the park. He's Jeremy Jordan. Like you have to give him these kind of songs, these power ballads. Like you have Jeremy Jordan on your cast. You have to write these kind of songs. And that's great. And I as an actual song, I like the song. I hate where it is in the show. And with that, on to the Valley of Ashes. This is a prime example of one of my biggest complaints in the show. I say that every time I bring up a new topic, but it's so frustrating. Like, the lyrics, it's so obvious. It's so incredibly obvious. Like, it's obviously trying to bring in the themes of the book that, like, you studied in high school. However, with the eyes of God, however, you don't need to say it. You don't need to say it. There are a lot of points in this show, lyric wise, in the songs, that I feel like it came straight out of one of the writer's high school papers about it. Like it's so obvious. I'm gonna get into it a bit later with with a more prevalent song within the narrative, but so obvious, not entirely necessary. Also, in the book was I don't believe Wilson was working with Wolfsheim in the book, and I think this is just adding to an unnecessary arc with the Wilsons. There are two arcs in the show that are emphasized much, much more than they are in the book. And I feel like those two arcs, one of them being the Wilsons, could have been excluded or left, or not excluded, but not done up nearly as much as they were. And given that mystery of Gatsby, at the end of this, once I finish going through all the songs, I'm going to go through kind of how I would have set it up, some of the songs I would have gotten rid of, some of the ideas I would have written a song about. And this is definitely one that is probably going to be heavily edited or just gone, if I were to do it. But yeah, it's so obvious and it's so unnecessary really, that it frustrates me that it's there with all the other things from the book that are messed with or excluded, that it's like, this is what you chose to go with? Really? Like this? And the next track is another one of those things that I'm like, really? This, you're going with this? Really? Is Secondhand Suit? I get that we're putting emphasis on the Wilsons, but I don't think this needs to be a song. This can be a few, not necessarily throwaway lines, but it doesn't need to be a song. This is a song that could have, this is a good 3 minutes that could have been given to another song um about Gatsby, about the mystery of Gatsby, that which is something I'm going to focus on like the entire rest of the show, is where could some of this time have gone? And a lot of the time the answer is going to be to the mystery of Gatsby, just because it's so worked up in the book that nobody really knows anything about Gatsby, and it's so worked up in New Money that nobody really knows who Gatsby is. But then it's just solved. And I feel like it could have been stretched out so much more and could have been made so much more entertaining and interesting and similar to the book in a way that makes me really frustrated that songs like Secondhand Suit are even in the show. Moving on to the next track after all that complaining, we have For Better or Worse. First thing I'm going to say about this one is Eva Noblezada's vocals are so incredible, especially in that last little, the last stanza that's kind of separate from the rest of the song. I think it's an interesting way to work the woman's point of view into the show, especially from the book that's narrated in first person by a man. Although there are several times in the book where Nick points out, like, oh, this has gotta suck for Daisy. But yeah, it's an interesting, it's a decent song. I find the lyrics kind of lacking. At least it's not repetitive like a lot of the other songs are, but I do find the lyrics somewhat lacking. Um, I just think I don't really have much to say other than the lyrics about this one, because I as much as it's not an addition that I would necessarily expect, I think it's a good one. So in the show, Tom gets Nick to go visit Myrtle's apartment with him by lying to him and saying, "Oh, we're going to go to the Met and you're going to get to see this exhibit that you want to see." So, which is why they really should have dropped me at the Met, which is honestly how I felt watching the show at this point. With the what is going on and why are they doing it like this, I was like, yeah, I should probably be at the Met right now instead. Because I love the Met. But at least the music is interesting, although this does get more into the going out of order that I was talking about before. Because even at the very end, if I wondered whether Tom's an asshole, Tom's an asshole. He removed all doubt, and Gatsby's proposition is the only thing my spinning mind can think about. I just sink into the sofa as the night grows more dim. God, what a coward should have torn the bastard limb from limb. But maybe there's another way that I can still get back at him. There's a trilling of a phone line. Yes, please connect me with Jay Gatsby. It just makes him seem so vindictive and out to get Tom, which I understand because I would also be out to get Tom because, as stated, he's an asshole. But that's not how Nick does it in the book, which it totally, totally fucks up Nick's characterization in a way that really frustrates me. Like, Nick is, as I said before, Nick is kind of just so whatever about a lot of things that in the book, that seeing him so invested in ruining things for Tom in the show, just it seems so wrong to me, and I'm not a fan. I don't like it. So the idea that he's only helping Gatsby to get back at Tom for being an asshole to his wife, who is Nick's cousin, obviously, rather than he thinks of Gatsby as a friend, because in the book, by the time Nick has his introduction, his real introduction to Gatsby, they've been friends, they've done stuff together, they've gone out to lunch. Nick's interactions with Wolfshine come while he's at lunch with Gatsby, and that's where you kind of get the hint that Gatsby got his money doing some not so good things. But still, like, they're friends, and Nick is like, obviously, if he's in business with Wolfsheim, he did some not so great things, but he's still a cool dude. Like, he did what he had to do to get to where he is, and I can respect that. Which is like, yeah, me too. So to kind of see Nick look at Gatsby in a different way in the show is odd, especially because the way that Nick sees Gatsby is why the end makes sense. So when we get to the end of the show and Nick is so invested in being upset at Daisy for what she did to Gatsby, it just seems kind of random, honestly. Like, I remember her watching Nick yell at Daisy in the show, and just like, but why do you care? Like, did you really like Gatsby that much? Because it doesn't seem like you did. They had like one actual friendly interaction, which I'm gonna get into later, but it changes the characterization so much. It just, these, what you would think of as like throwaway lines in a song, just changes the characterization so much that, and just the order being so wrong changes it all so much that it doesn't make sense by the end of the show. If you have to stick to the book ending, it doesn't make sense with the show, and it's frustrating, and I have been thinking about it ever since I saw the show, and ever since I listened to the cast recording. Now, to switch from a song that frustrates me and had me ranting like that to a fun, lighthearted song, we have Only Tea. This song is fun. It's book accurate as well, so there's not going to be as much complaining. It's one of the better songs so far, especially lyrically, and it works in a lot of book quotes, which is another thing I'm so excited about. Like, Nick and Gatsby's interaction, like, oh, do you have everything you need in the way of tea? Yes, I picked up lemon cakes. Like, that's like from the book, and it's so fun. It's very funny as well. Like, we have all the Gatsby, like, oh, it's fine. Oh, and he's panicking. Drown me in the bay. You know, I'm gonna go scream in a jar. It's very fun. It's funny. It's a good song. I like it being here. It's book accurate. No complaints. No complaints about this song. And now back to complaints. My green light. Oh my god. The first thing I said about this show after seeing it was, this is what a straight A's in English superiority complex does to bitches. And this was right when we cut to intermission, right after this song. This was exactly what was in my head when I said that. That is exactly, this song is what was in my head when I thought that initially. And I think it still sums up my thoughts after the cast recording has come out and I've gotten to listen to the songs again, is that it's all too obvious. It goes back to Valley of Ashes. It's going to show up again a lot later. It's just all so obvious. I wanted to go into this show knowing the themes and the motifs of the book and see how it would be translated to stage. What I got instead was a depiction of those things. It felt like watching a staging of a school project. Like, the things in the lyrics were the same things I wrote in my paper sophomore year of high school when I read the book. I already know those things, and I assume that someone writing an adaptation, does as well, and I wanted to see their interpretations of it. However, in this case, I know the writers know these things because they straight up made the characters say it. We, as people who read the book, know that the green light of Daisy's dock represents Gatsby's hope to see her again, and is his reminder and reason for going on. We don't need him to say it. We know he thinks the light is Daisy, and it represents what he's working towards. We don't need him to say it's his reason for going on. We know that. I want him to say something that implies that it's his reason for going on, so that I can say, oh, that's a good way to show that without being outright and straightforward, which is what I got through the entire show, outright and straightforward. There was very little left up to interpretation that could have been that could have been done differently artistically. It didn't have to be this explicit song that straight up says, oh, you're, let's see, what are the lyrics? Let's see what the lyrics. My green light, blinking permission, sending a code, granting admission, follow the road, right or wrong, my green light. I had this feeling as I was falling, the sound crossed the bay was the sound of you calling. You're a lighthouse, you're a lighthouse, you're a signal flare. There's love and danger everywhere. Only we know what we've both been through. If I save you, will you save me too? Save me too, save me too. Like we didn't need them asking them to save each other. We get that. There could have been a much different, much more creative way to get that into the show without putting it in the lyrics and making it the act 1 finale, you know. Now, that being said, I think the most frustrating part, or another very frustrating part, I won't say the most frustrating part because I've been saying that all video. Another frustrating part of this song is that it's very catchy and very good, and when I'm listening to it in between my recording so that I can have much more like off the top of my head analysis and, you know, a recent a fresh memory of what is in the song, and as I'm looking through the lyrics, is that I kept finding myself singing along because it is a very catchy song. It's not a bad song, it's just the lyrics are a little too much for me and make me frustrated. And Jeremy Jordan and Evan Oblazada are so incredible singing this song. And I mean, it's frustrating because it is one of those catchy, like, jingle. It's like getting a commercial stuck in your head. You know, it's like, I don't need to be thinking about this breakfast cereal or whatever. I don't need to be thinking about how the lyrics are so obvious and how this show is so obvious. And there are so many things that I would have done differently with the show. But unfortunately, this song is stuck in my head because it is catchy and it's fun. I'm going to admit that it's fun and it's grand and it's Act 1 finale, so it's supposed to be. And it does the job. It's just that the lyrics themselves frustrate me and make me mad, and just, I already know all the things that they're saying. Like, I know it, and I mean, The Great Gatsby is 100 years old. It's why we have 2 shows of it right now, because it's public domain now. Like, people know The Great Gatsby. You don't have to tell them, you don't have to spoon feed them the details and the themes and everything of The Great Gatsby. If they don't know it, then they haven't read the book. Like, I admittedly, thinking back to when I was like 15 before I read the book, I didn't know anything about The Great Gatsby, but now I do. And like, it's just so incredible to me that someone could write some of these lyrics and say, yes, this is fit for a Broadway adaptation of this show. This is something that I would write in like a high school project to show that, oh yeah, I understand the themes of The Great Gatsby, so I'm going to make them say it, and I'm going to make it obvious so my teacher knows that I know. We don't need that in a Broadway show. We want the artistic depictions. I don't, it's incredible to me how some of this couldn't have been a little more complex. And from here we start with Act 2, which begins with a song for Wolfsheim called Shady, about all of his shady business. Because we as an audience are incapable of coming to our own conclusions intellectually based on the contents of the show and Wolfsheim's actions. They have to be sure to tell us that Wolfsheim isn't isn't a clean dude, that he's in some shady business, which, just right back to it's so obvious. When we're really introduced to Wolfsheim in the book, it's kind of an accident that Nick even finds out that he's in any kind of shady business at all, or anything that's not too clean, because he says so himself, thinking Nick wants in because Gatsby had been telling him that he knows a guy who might want in. So he comes to the conclusion that Wolfsheim comes to the conclusion, I mean, that Nick is the guy. So he says something, but in the show, it has to be explicitly stated at the beginning of Act 2, after, Daisy and Gatsby have finally had their reunion, and they've explicitly stated, oh, you're going to save me from my horrible life that I don't like. We have to explicitly be told that one of the characters isn't necessarily a good guy. Just a lot of obvious, straight to the point, doesn't trust us, don't trust us as an audience, that kind of stuff. Shady is also the beginning of the show's kind of like losing of the plot of the book, especially just listening to the cast recording. If I hadn't seen the show before the cast recording came out and just had been listening to the show, to the cast recording, I would have been so lost. Just because this is, again, like putting emphasis on an arc that doesn't need to be given emphasis, that could have gone somewhere else, to the mystery of Gatsby, because that's just such a big part of the book, like down to the end. Even after you learn about Gatsby, you're still learning about Gatsby all the way through. So that it could have been the time this for this song could have been given to something else. And this is actually how I feel about a lot of the songs in Act 2, really, especially a lot of like the reprises, however you want to say it. That just a lot of it so could have gone somewhere else. From there, we move on to Better Hold Tight. Better Hold Tight is kind of a whatever song for me. It's a short one, but it gets to another thing that really irritates me about the show, is one of the arcs that is given a lot of time and emphasis that I didn't think needed to be there so much, or as much as it was, is the romance between Jordan and Nick. Like, yes, it's a part of the book, obviously, but it is so played up, and you don't really hear it in the cast recording because it doesn't have much song, but it has a lot of stage time, and it's something that I was like, we could be doing something else. We could be doing something else. We could totally be doing something else. And so this song just kind of reminds me of how much I really didn't care for it in the show. So it's not a bad song. It's just a little repetitive, and the kind of like it's referencing a lot of stuff that wouldn't make sense if you hadn't seen the show. Like, to start, could it be 1917? Have we stepped inside a time machine? And Jordan goes, something out of H.G. Wells or another one of Gatsby's spells. He's throwing a themed party to impress Daisy and try to get her to remember what the time that they met. So Nick and Jordan have to participate. And so this is them like admiring each other before the dance really starts, the party starts. And it's whatever. It's whatever. Really. It's good performances by the actors. And I think it is something good to have given them, but as a song, it's kind of whatever to me. However, I did talk about the Nick and Jordan arc, that this song revolves around. And the one thing I will say about giving that more stage time is that is how they incorporated the Gatsby Nick friendship, is kind of calling each other out in their romances, and Gatsby and At one point, Nick tries to say something about this party, and Gatsby's like, "Oh well, what would you know? What are you doing with Jordan?" And they kind of laugh at each other, and then go back to their thing, and it's like the closest they come to like real friendship in the show. So I think at least it gave us that, which I don't know. I mean, at least it gave us that, which is something that was book accurate. But again, it's kind of a whatever song to me. Now the next song is "Past Is Catching Up to Me." It it's probably one of, if not the best song in the show. It's book accurate, which is always going to be a big thing for me, obviously. The lyrics are good, the music is good. It's a Jeremy Jordan song. What more could you want? Um, it's lyrically and thematically complex, probably the most complex in the show. I think if every song in the show was given as much attention as this one obviously was, I would have a lot less complaints when it comes to the lyrics of the songs. But obviously they weren't. So this is the most lyrically and thematically complex song. It's clever. It has a lot of the idea of the past is catching up, the past is coming back, is both good and bad, and it's a very interesting. It's a good song. It's a good song. It's definitely one of the few from the show that I will be listening to outside of like as a show, and as I do this review, this is definitely going to be um one of the ones that I listen to anyway because it is a good song. It's very impressive for like vocally from Jeremy Jordan. Um yeah, and it's very, I don't quite want to say refreshing, but it's very nice to get something so book accurate after Shady and Better Hold Tight, but especially after Shady. So, yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I want to talk about it more, but most of what I've been saying that makes sections on songs so long is negative, so I think not saying much about this one is probably a better thing. But yeah, it's a good song. I enjoy it. Up next is La Dee Dah With You. This song isn't really like plot relevant. I don't have anything against it. It's a dance number. It's the song performed at the party that Gatsby is putting on to take Daisy back in time. And it's a good song. It's fun. It's fine. Um it's not, as I said, it's not plot relevant, and it doesn't need to be. It's a dance number. Um I believe on stage there's lots of conversation among Nick and Gatsby and Jordan and Daisy and Tom and all them, and they're all arguing. But it's not in the cast recording, which I'm thankful for because, in my opinion, a lot of the spoken dialogue doesn't flow well within this cast recording for some reason. So I'm glad it's not so much in there. But yeah, this, I mean, it's good for what it is. It is also a very impressive vocal performance from this ensemble member. I don't remember exactly who it is. I don't remember her name, but if I'm remembering correctly from the advertisements and from the time I saw it, this performer is who I saw as Daisy when I saw the show, which should give you an idea of who you'll see if you miss Evan Oblazada. If you're seeing this around the time that, before anyone's left. Up next is Go. It's Gatsby and Daisy's "Oh, We're Gonna Run Away" song um during and after the party. Um it I think the lyrics are weak. I think it's repetitive. It's book accurate, which I appreciate. It's very like, you know what, yeah, let's go. Let's get out of here. I think which what they did in the book, and it's very like Gatsby having the idea of like, we are going to tell your husband that you don't love him and that you're going to leave. And she's like, "Oh, okay, good idea." And it's that moment. And I feel like the lyrics are really simple and could definitely be a bit more complex. But what can you do? Up next is Made to Last. I think this one's clever. I think this one is also pretty lyrically complex. I'll give it that. It's book accurate, my favorite. And I think it could have been a little well a little more well executed, but it definitely could have been worse, and I think that is evident with the last stanza when everybody is screaming at each other and you can't even tell what anybody's saying. Like, I'm looking at the lyrics and it makes no sense. I still can't hear any individual words or voices, and I can't make any of it out. So I feel like the whole thing could have been like that, but it wasn't. So that's good. And there's a lot of they gave Tom some really good lines in this one. Um, I think it is also kind of funny in the first stanza when he's like, "Oh, that's the kind of progress I can do without it." Just I feel like it's a good little tip of the hat to the fact that Book Tom is so incredibly racist within the first like 20 pages of the book, and it's just like in racist and sexist and all that fun stuff, and it's just like you can't do with any kind of progress, and I think that's evident also in the musical. But yeah, no, I think this is another good one. It's clever. I find it a bit lacking, but it could definitely be a lot worse. Up next is the first of the really short reprises. First we have For Better or Worse. This is between Nick and Jordan deciding that, oh hey, maybe we don't want to get married because they have them getting engaged in this show, which just is what I'm talking about with you can't really hear it in the cast recording, but on screen on stage, I mean, it's given so much time. There's like a proposal and discussion of marriage, and it's just too much, and it's again just a whole arc that could have gone a whole 45-second little song that could have gone to something else that would have been more book accurate. Next we have One Way Road. This song is Myrtle talking about how she is following the group, Jordan, Nick, Daisy, Gatsby, and Tom, to New York because she has to tell Tom that she is pregnant with his baby, which is a choice that they made. And I think it was an unnecessary one. It adds to the Wilson's arc, which I mean, again, I don't think it's necessary. And I also think that the song is pretty repetitive as well. The lyrics are lacking. And I know, like, when I'm listening to it, I'm like, wow, she changed her mind pretty quick. But like, I know that's the point of the song. It's like the song is the soliloquy, the monologue, just in song, and that's like the point of the whole thing is to be changing your mind and working your way through things. But her priorities switched fast, and there is absolutely no reason from the book to believe that Myrtle, thought any of this in the minutes leading up to her death. Like it's just additions that could have gone somewhere else. Next, we have Wilson singing God Sees Everything. It's a short one, but it is another great example of um, high school analysis paper to script. It's very obvious right in your face. Let's see. You've got the eyes of God, Doc, but who's going to be his hands? Proceeds to go kill Gatsby. Those kind of things. It's very, like, in your face obvious, and it's not as bad as I initially thought it was, and it's not as bad as some of the other songs, but I mean, it is a good performance from the heartbroken Wilson after his wife died. But yeah, I mean, still obvious. Next is another reprise of For Her. We get back to some book accuracy with with Gatsby just absolutely not believing that Daisy won't come back to him in the end. Yeah, book accurate, fun. The lyrics, I mean, not fun. This is when Gatsby dies, but like the lyrics are pretty good again. There's still a little bit of obviousness with like the light is still green, but so the light still being green is still undying hope, blah blah blah. We all get the point by this point. We do have Wilson showing up because obviously Wilson's gonna kill Gatsby. And he says, forgive me for being his hands, going back to who's gonna be God's hands, that kind of thing. But yeah, this was a short song. It's another good, accurate one. Now, next we have the New Money reprise. Um, it's a quick little thing about people gossiping about Gatsby again. It's it's fine. All I gotta say about it. I mean, there is the one part at the end with like "see you at the funeral" and then everyone laughs, which is, book reference to the fact that Nick is the only one at Gatsby's funeral, which kind of drives him off the deep end for a bit. But yeah, all there is to this one. And up next we have Beautiful Little Fool, which book accurate. Yay! Obviously it's a pretty big iconic quote that Daisy says is the best thing a girl can be in this world is a beautiful little fool, which is the big verse in this song. I will say the lyrics are repetitive, but it also, that's not even so much my problem as much as it feels like For Better or Worse 2.0. Like this could have been where For Better or Worse is, and For Better or Worse didn't have to be there, and For Better or Worse the reprise could have been just the original For Better or Worse, and it could have been longer. I don't know. It feels like, I mean, because the quote in the book is at the very beginning of the book, and this being at the end, I understand what they were trying to do. I just don't like it, which I feel like is how a lot of how I feel about this show. It's like I understand what they were trying to do, but either it wasn't executed well, and or I just don't like it. And I know not liking those kind of changes, like moving Beautiful Little Fool to the end, is definitely a personal thing, like I discussed with the narration aspect in Roarin On. But this is my review. This is my video, and I can say that I don't think it worked. I didn't like it. And coming in last, we have the finale, Roarin On. It ends with Nick kind of wrapping everything up, like, oh, that he's leaving New York, and he's like, oh, remember Tom and Daisy and Jordan and Wolfsheim and the Wilsons? Yeah, no, we were all desperate and hopeless, really. Kind of that in reminiscing on Gatsby and just thinking about what like a fool he was and his hope. And then as Nick finishes his wrapping up of everything, wrapping up of the plot, we have the ensemble coming in and doing a little reprise of Roarin' On, and that's how the show ends.